Well, howdy, y'all. I'm Debs. Welcome, or welcome back to my channel, Rainy Read Stuff. I'm here in the book chat. It's a Monday, and I am going to move this camera and juggle everything about. There you go. I am going to talk to you about what I think is possibly one of my very favourite booktube events. It's the 1st of July. June on the Range ended yesterday. June on the Range is about reading westerns. It is the brainchild of Michael K. Vaughan, and I have had the best time ever. So, what have I read? Where's my list? There's my list. There were a couple of prompts for this year's event, which incidentally was my first, because I wasn't on BookTube last June, so I missed it. One of the prompts was to read some Louis L'Amour. I accidentally discovered Louis L'Amour last year, reading one book, loved it. So, I read Hondo, and you see him? I don't think that's what Hondo looks like. I think that looks like David's soul with scars, and doesn't do anything for me. Anyway, Hondo was first published in 1953, and this is the 30th anniversary edition of it. Hondo is a ranger working for the American government, and whilst carrying dispatches from one place to another place, he comes across this homestead where there is a woman and a young lad. Her husband, she says, is away. Turns out she doesn't quite know where he's gone. He's been away a long time, and she doesn't know when he's coming back. So Hondo stays around for a while and helps her with a couple of things on the homestead. Then he heads off to the army base, where he discovers that some Native Americans are attacking ranchers and homesteaders in the area, and he worries a bit for this woman, so he goes back to see her. While he's in town, there is a dispute, and he kills a guy. Turns out it's the woman's husband. Anyway, in the meantime, the local Native American chief, has arrived with some of his compatriots at this homestead, and the young lad pulls a gun on them because they're trying to get his mum to marry off to someone else. This impresses the old chief, who declares that they are brothers and will not be harmed. But then later the old chief is killed, and any protection that the family has is gone. So, can Hondo, who is beginning to have feelings for this woman, either persuade her to head back to the army camp or save her? And also, what's he going to do about the fact that he's killed her husband? Well, this was great. Loved it. Next one I read, completely different. Absolutely loved this too. So, Flint was rescued as a kid by a guy who paid for his education, but was a bit of a gangster himself, and taught Flint all sorts of things, and then was killed in a bar. Flint then took himself off to New York, where he became a self-made man, millionaire, married someone. She wasn't very nice. She tried to kill him. Turns out the only reason she married him was for his money. And then Flint is told that he's dying. And what he wants most is to go back to the Malpais Badlands and die there alone. And his early benefactor told him of a place that was his hideout that he wouldn't be able to find in this sort of weird volcanic landscape. Um, he heads home. He leaves his wife, doesn't tell her, winds up his affairs with a solicitor so his money is sorted, etc., and heads back west. On the train, he meets a woman who is running a ranch, and her ranch is under attack. He feels the need to help her and becomes involved with them. It's very different to Hondo. All the time, he's got this threat of death over his head. I love the characters. One of the other things I like about not only Louis L'Amour actually, but other Western authors as well, you don't have damsels in distress. I mean, these women are gun-toting, hard-speaking. They know what they're doing. The women out west had to be strong, and these books are full of strong female characters. Finally, for Louis L'Amour, I listened to um, what's it called? Oh, here it is. Mistakes Can Kill You. This was quite a large collection of short stories, but they weren't just short stories in there, there were novellas as well. These stories were varying lengths. I enjoyed them varying amounts. None of them were bad, but I enjoyed some more than others. Some had, 8, 10 chapters. They were novellas rather than short stories, but it was great listening to those in the car. The other prompt was to read a um, Zane Grey. I went for Riders of the Purple Sage because I am relatively new to um, westerns, and I wanted to read some classics. I googled it, which are the best westerns to read. So this one, Riders of the Purple Sage. Oh, not very good. A lot of Zane Grey books are on Project Gutenberg, so I've downloaded loads for reading at a later date. So this this was about a guy who was he suddenly appears in this town in Utah, and he's looking for his sister. It turns out later he comes across this woman who is a Mormon, but the leaders of the church in the town have taken offense to her. She has been left this large ranch with by her father, who was also a good Mormon. Um, they don't like the way she's running her life. She shouldn't be running a large ranch on her own. She should be married, and she should be married to one of the church leaders. But she doesn't want to marry the church leader and has no intention of. Um, she helps out non-Mormons in the town. They don't like that either. She employs non-Mormons. They're not really partial to that either. And she also has a very close relationship with a guy who is not a Mormon, and that's just the final straw. So they set about trying to close her down. And although there's a lot of anti-Mormon sentiment in this, It's not all that, because your main character, female character Jane, is a Mormon herself. Um, I found Zane Grey to be very good at describing the environment and describing the natural world. I really enjoyed this book. It took me a lot. It took me a bit longer to get into it than it did the Louis L'Amours, but once I was into it, I couldn't put it down. Um, as I said, I was going for classics, and so my other audiobook, Charles Portiss, True Grit. This had the added benefit of being narrated by Donna Tartt, who was just brilliant. I think Maddie is one of the best female characters I've come across. She is 14. She has seen her dad gunned down outside their home. She is determined. She is fearless in the way that only kids can be. She heads off to the nearest city to hire a marshal to help her track down the killer of her father so she can bring him to justice. She wants him dragged back, put before the court, and hanged. The marshal she finds, well, she goes to the sheriff and asks him to recommend some. And he recommends some, but says this guy is probably not for her because he's just too out of control. That's the one she goes for. His name is Walter Colburn. Um, and they and a Texas Ranger who is also looking for the murderer for a completely different reason head out to try and find him. Neither of them are very keen on taking Maddie along. Maddie isn't staying behind. This was brilliant, just brilliant. And her character is just so amazing. After True Grit, I went for some fun. Last year, I also accidentally discovered a Larry and Stretch book. Um, it was from a large series. It was from the middle of the series. I always do that. I thought I would, this time, start at the beginning. So this is Larry and Stretch 1, Drift. It's by Marshall Grover, who turns out, even though he has a brilliant name for an author of westerns, it's in fact Australian. Larry and Stretch are two Texans. They haven't been in Texas in either of the books I've read, and that has got them into some trouble because they take offense very quickly at people who are scathing of Texas and of Texans. It gets them into a lot of fights, and they spend, quite some time in jail thinking on the error of their ways. These are fun. There's a lot of humour in these, more so than in the others that I've read. I've got the next two now, so I shall enjoy those at some point. And I thought we'd bung some kids' stuff in there just for fun. So I'm midway through the Laura Ingalls Wilder Little House on the Prairie series. This is book 5 of 7. It's called The Long Winter. As you can see from the cover, and probably the title, it's about a long winter with lots of blizzards and how small homesteaders move into the town of Desmet to try and survive this incredibly hard winter. I don't know whether it is but I don't remember it in the last book. I think this is the first mention that we of Almanzo Wilder, who Laura Ingalls Wilder goes on to marry. Um, some more classics. So next up was Witch's Crossing by John Williams. Um, I've seen a lot of things saying that the reviews I read afterwards were very mixed, and a lot of people said it wasn't as good as Stoner. Now, I haven't read John Williams' Stoner, so I wasn't comparing it to anything. Butcher's Crossing is about a place called Butcher's Crossing. And a guy from the East, he's been at university at Harvard. He decides that his, very well-to-do lifestyle isn't for him. He wants to he wants to have an adventure. He heads out west, where he seeks out a former acquaintance of his father, who is running a business selling buffalo skins, and he asks him to put him in touch with someone who is going to help him explore the country. He's put in touch with a buffalo hunter, and they concoct this plan to go and find an enormous herd of buffalo that the hunter saw briefly about a decade beforehand in the mountains. In He believes they're in a valley that nobody else knows about. So him, the two of them, the hunter's sidekick, and a guy who is employed to skin buffalo as they are hunted, head out on this arduous journey to the mountains, and eventually, after many traumas, they find this valley, and they're right, there's this huge herd of buffalo in them, and they set about butchering them for their skins and their meat, but mainly for their skins. But they don't leave in time, and they get snowed in. And it's interesting in that it's a book about disintegrating relationships. You've got these four people who are thrown together in this very isolated environment, and it's how they cope initially with the journey, and then the isolation and the work that they're having to do, and then with the trauma of being stuck. It's not a joyous book, it's a very good book. I really enjoyed the writing in it, and I'm very glad I read it. Elmore Leonard, Hombre. Again, very different book. So you have here a child of Mexican and American parentage who, at a young age, was captured by American Indians and brought up with them. And then he was rescued. He had a mentor who educated him and became very close. But then he opted to go back to the Native Americans and live again with them. Mentor dies and leaves Hombre a house in the nearby town. Now, the place that they're living it's been avoided by the railroad, so it's dying. And this Mexican guy who owns a stagecoach company, the company is shutting down. He agrees to take several people on a final journey into town, and he persuades our Hombre to go with him. So there's the owner of the stagecoach company, there's a former worker of the stagecoach company who is our narrator, and there is our Hombre. Then we have a doctor, not a medical one, and his wife, who have been working for the government as supply masters to a reservation. And then there is another old guy that's going to go, but just as their transportation is about to leave, he is forced to give his ticket to another man. So these people all head off. Did I mention the young girl? There's a young girl who had been captured by Native Americans. I really can't, I hope you can't hear the banging from next door. And has been rescued and is on her way home to her family. So these are the occupants. They head off across country to town. And it's going to take them a few days. Midway through the journey, they are stopped by a couple of gunmen. And the gentleman who forced his way onto the coach is in league with the gunmen. They want a large amount of money that the doctor has and my alarm goes off, that the doctor has acquired by cheating those on the reservation of the supplies that have been sent by the government and selling it. So these three gunmen want his money. He won't give it to them. They take his wife instead. He doesn't appear to care. The gunmen go off, say he can have his wife back when he gives them the money. I don't think he's going to do that. Hombre, they've now got no coach. They've got no horses. They've got very few supplies, and he heads off across country to get to safety, basically. And it's strange because he doesn't appear to give two hoots about all the others. They can follow him if they want to. It's entirely up to them. He's not going to force them. He's not even going to justify what he's doing. He knows what the right thing to do is, and the choices for what they intend to do is theirs. This doesn't end well. That's all I'm going to say. But it's so well written. Such a great book. All of these books have been so different from each other as well. You know, you expect cowboys, someone in trouble, they're usually going to kill a couple of Native Americans. Everything's all right in the end. And these have all been so very different from each other. The Mark of Zorro, Johnston McCulley. This was from Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. It was great fun. I mean, this wasn't as well written as the others. I think Zorro has remained in favour because of the TV series, various films, comic books, etc., etc. It's not as well written. It's great fun though. I definitely knew right from the outset who Zorro was. I don't know if I was meant to. I couldn't decide whether I was meant to or not, but it was blatantly obvious who Zorro was. But it's a bit of fun. I enjoyed it. Um, there is the huge plot flaw, if you're going to read the others, in that Zorro tells the world who he is. He unmasks himself right at the end, and then for subsequent books puts his mask back on and everybody's meant to pretend they don't know. Apart from that, very entertaining. Finally for the novels and short stories, I downloaded an enormous volume. I discovered these mega packs, and they're dirt cheap. They're like from between 39p and 79p, I think I've paid for them. They do all sorts of themes. I got some for horror mayhem. I have now got probably about 8 of the Western ones. Some of them include lots of short stories. This one included 4 novels. It says classic novels, but I don't know. I read Gun Law on the Range by Burt Arthur. Wasn't as good as the other ones I'd read. I did still enjoy it. This was more of, I don't know, it just struck me as, it's not, I don't know whether it's a classic or not. You've got a family, mum, dad, son, daughter, living on this ranch. There's a bit of a feud between them and the people next door. Um, and the people next door are very wealthy, and the dad runs the town in that he's paid for and selected the judge, and he's paid for and selected the sheriff. Um, he has a son. The two sons get into a fight, um, and the son of the rich guy is not happy to have been beaten. So he lies in wait with a rifle and is expecting the other guy to come along, but actually it's his father, and he shoots him and he dies. He claims it was self-defense. He claims it was an accident. The family know it wasn't, and later there's a fight between the two of them, and rich son pulls a knife. There's a struggle. He is killed. So then his father decides that the other one needs to be done for murder, but actually, and all the people in the town are likely to give evidence against him. It's quite complex. I did really enjoy it. I did really enjoy it. It just wasn't quite as good as some of the others, that's all. I also found cowboy poetry, and I read a couple. Um, One was recommended to me by Jim at Mystery and Mayhem, who's one of the co-hosts, and that was Robert Service, who was writing about the Yukon. And the other one, if I can find it, so which did I read? I read Spells of the Yukon and Other Poems. The Spell of the Yukon and Other Verses by Robert W. Service. And then I also read, oh look, I can't find it now. That's annoying, because I can't remember the guy's name. Nope, it's gone. It's disappeared off my list forever. Never mind, I read lots. I absolutely love this event. Michael K. Vaughan, all the co-hosts, thank you so much. I've had so much fun. And now I'm going to have to take off the cowboy hat and put on some sort of space helmet for Rocket Summer. So that's it from me for now. I am going to continue to read westerns, whether it's June on the Range or not, because that's the way I roll. Thank you for stopping by, and let me know what you've been reading. I'll speak to you very soon. Bye for now.